Hey everyone, I am so excited to be with you. About a year ago, Pastor Michael actually contacted me, I think after the previous conference, and invited me to be a part of this year. And I was really looking forward to being there in person with you guys. And many of you I have met before, some of you I have not. But I am just so thankful that I can still be a part of it, even though we are here online, away in some parts or in distance, but we're also together in spirit. And so I just want to say to Pastor Michael, thank you so much for having me and inviting me to be a part of this. He's been sharing with me over the past few weeks about the emphasis of this conference specifically. And I'm excited for the emphasis and what he's going to be sharing after my session. And after he shared with me, the Lord really downloaded some very specific things that I'm going to be sharing with you guys. And in some senses, what I'm going to be teaching out of is not new for me to teach out of, but actually everything that I've written and put together is very unique and it is new. And I really feel like it's a specific word for the leaders that are joining this online conference. And even if you're not a church leader or a pastor in the region and you're just joining me and you're a follower of Jesus, I believe that these sessions are going to be applicable for you as well. And so I just want to begin this session by giving you a little bit of the backstory of what our ministry does and kind of where we're coming from. So we live and do ministry here in Georgia. We're in a smaller town called Columbus, Georgia. And in the Bible Belt here, there's a church on every corner. And there's a lot of amazing things that God is doing in our city and through all of the different churches. And it's just incredible, seeing what God is doing. But at the same time, there's still just so much need in our city. And our ministry really exists to partner with local churches here in our city to help train and equip not only the leaders, but even just everyday followers of Jesus in these congregations, how to better engage the neighborhood or the city that is right around all of these churches. And so over the past 8 or 9 years, we've had the opportunity to work with dozens and dozens of congregations in our city, big churches, small churches, a wide variety of congregations. And our primary heart is just to see churches, step even more so into their missional calling as a community. And I know that, Pastor Michael even mentioned at the beginning that it's almost as if the word evangelism is a byword in many churches or just in a lot of church cultures. It's kind of scary, like, oh man, what do you mean evangelism? And what we're going to do today is we're not going to actually focus on how do we do evangelism in our city, but we're going to focus on a process of stepping into personally, but even as a corporate culture. So you and your church and your organization stepping into this process of allowing God to empower you and your church congregants to reach your city and engage your city as never before. And I know already that this is on your heart. If you're a leader, if you're serving in the body of Christ, if you're leading a church, I know that, the condition of your city, the things that you see happening in your town and in your schools and different things, I know that it moves your heart. And I know that that God wants to move in a powerful way. And many times, I know for me personally, I sense God's heart for our community and for like my neighborhood. And I'm just like, okay, Lord, now what do I do? How do I do this? And so that's what I'm going to really be focusing in on, is trying to give you guys some practical next. About 3 or 4 years ago, we contacted the city about this lot, which was just sitting here. It was abandoned. And we really saw, we saw the potential of what could be done with this plot of land. And so they actually leased it to us for $1 a year. And so since then, what we've been doing is developing this little plot of land. And one of the things we've done is we established a garden here, and we grow 2 different crops a year, one during the summer, one during the winter. You can actually grow basically year round here. And
Then another thing that we did is this summer, we built a playground here because there was no place for any kids in this area to go and play. Basically, the playground was the street. So we built a playground, we got the garden here, and here we have today the Bradley Circle Community Garden. You think they're still good?
Yeah, some of them you can salvage a little bit out of here.
Let's take a big bite out of one and see how they taste. Is that a little baby carrot?
Yeah.
Where did you find it? In the dirt?
Yeah. But this is a big carrot.
So down here, there's a bunch of baby carrots in our garden. In the wintertime, we put a bunch of seed for these carrots, but Ellen and I didn't know how to thin out the seeds. And so this shows what happens when you're planting your garden if you forget or don't know how to thin out the seed. There was way too many carrots planted in here. We let too many carrots take root. And so what happens is when you have too many things in a small little area of dirt, they all end up stunted and they don't grow. And so this is actually a really significant thing that has spoken to Ellen and I. Really, God's been using this specifically this year because the word that God gave to us was the word simplify. And when we saw these carrots, we were reminded of how when you have too many things going on, even if they're good things, and you don't have enough room in your life to maintain those things and tend them, what happens is there's not enough nutrients, or there's not enough strength that you have to invest in all those things. And so what happens is many times you can have way too much going on and nothing in your life is really thriving or excelling. And it's because just like these carrots, they're in the ground and these are good carrots, but they didn't have enough soil to expand and grow. And so we need to simplify our lives in such a way that we have enough margin in our lives so that the most important things can thrive and get the attention and the things that they need so that we can grow those things in our lives. And many times the hard part of living a simple life or having margin in your life is that you have to say no to good things and yes to the best things. And that's the hard thing to discern, is what's a good thing and what's the best thing in our lives.
All right, well, I hope you guys were able to see that video. But that is a video that you may not believe this, but we actually filmed that video 4 weeks before coronavirus hit. So that was filmed in February of 2020. And in November, December of 2019, the Lord spoke very clearly to me and my wife, and he gave us one word. He basically said, this is the one thing I'm going to do in your life in 2020. And he said, simplify. I'm going to simplify your life. And we laugh now as we look back, because honestly, we had very little idea what he actually meant when he said, I'm going to simplify your life. Because from the time that we recorded that video, we had this moment where, when I was teaching this moment in the video that we created, just a couple of weeks before, Ellen had gone into the garden and she was actually weeding the garden alone. And she felt like the Lord spoke that to her about all these carrots that she had discovered. And we had planted all these carrots, but no one had ever shown us how to thin out the carrot plants or kind of what to do. And so we just left them alone, and we thought, hey, they'll grow, something will happen, right? And you can see in that video, we were actually unearthing this whole bed where there was too many carrots planted in one bed, and they were so concentrated that they were all these little stunted carrots. And clear to us was that ultimately our life was cram-packed with so many good things, but ultimately nothing about what we were doing was bearing the kind of fruit that God really wanted us to be able to bear. And anyways, the whole year, even after COVID hit, these carrots just kept coming up in my conversations with Ellen, even with our whole team here. We just used it as an illustration. And it was a powerful way for us to heed the word that the Lord had given us to simplify in the year of 2020. And so that's going to be the primary focus of this session. Is I believe that before we get to the subject of how do we bear fruit and how do we engage and how do we see more lost souls saved, I actually think that one of the major things that's getting in the way and has gotten in the way in the past for the church engaging our city is it's not the city that has the problem, or the city isn't creating a barrier for the church. I believe that the church actually, and many times we build our own barriers that prevent us from actually engaging our city. And I think that one of the greatest barriers that keeps us from engaging our city is busyness. It's just us doing so many church things that we're never truly engaging the lost. And we're so busy running our activities and programs that we literally don't even have the time or the energy to engage those outside of the four walls of the church. And so I believe that the first part of the process of engaging your city is to submit to the process of pruning and simplification. And my guess right now is, whether you're a church leader or you are just a follower of Jesus, is that in the past 12 months, you have already started this process of pruning and simplification. That's just a guess on my part. But the whole world, in a sense, has gone through a pruning process, a simplification process. Everyone has been slowed down in a lot of major ways. But the thing that I want to say about that is that many times I think we take for granted, and we think that because everything's slowed down that we actually have simplified. But the reality is that I think also a lot of people in the church world are really just waiting. Okay, when can things get back to normal so we can turn all those buttons back on and get all these programs and different things that we like, who we really believe we are. We want all those things to happen again so we can feel normal again. And I believe that the Lord actually wants us to really question that and say, do we really even need to hit some of those buttons and restart some of those things? And I'm not going to necessarily tell you, what to do, but I'm just going to pose some questions in this session that I believe are helpful and will be a guide. So let's look at John chapter 15, and we're actually going to look at the first two verses of the chapter. In the next session, I'm going to go verse 3 through 8. And then we'll dive in the latter part of this section in John 15 for my third session. So we're actually going to walk through this passage together, line by line and verse by verse for the sessions. And then I'm going to throw some questions out here in just a minute. So if you have just a comment or a question or something God's stirring on your heart, I want to encourage you even right now to just throw that out there. And but let's read this passage together. Jesus said, "I am the true vine. My Father is the vine dresser. And every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit." Let's talk about two realities of pruning. Number one, in the first verse of John 15, we see God actually portrayed as a vine dresser. And this is a characteristic and an attribute of the Father that I believe is actually not taught on enough in the church. And that's the fact that, yes, he's a good Father, but one of the demonstrations of his goodness is the fact that he prunes us, and pruning is painful. And so that's one of the interesting things, is a lot of times we think of, okay, God is this perfect Father. He's a good Father. It's who he is, right? And we sing that song. But one of the greatest demonstrations of his goodness is the fact that he disciplines us, is the fact that he prunes us and prunes us down so that we can be more fruitful. And that's the second point from these verses, is that God does pruning so that we can bear more fruit. Pruning is a good thing. Now, pruning is not something, just like discipline is not something that we enjoy in the moment, but many times with hindsight, we are very, very thankful for it. And here's what I want to say about the past year for the church world, the church worldwide. I believe that in decades to come, that in spite of all of the pain and the loss and just everything that we've suffered, I believe that the church is going to look at this past year and actually be thankful for the pruning that God did in the systems of the church, and really allowing the church to pivot and to shift the way that we're doing things. And Pastor Michael's going to look at that in the next session. But what I want to talk about is, when we think of pruning and simplification, I want to talk about 4 types of branches that you have to deal with when you're pruning. And so I don't know if you've ever done gardening before. We have this community garden that we use. We feed our community. It's free food. We just let anyone get whatever they want. And my family and a local church that we partner with, they help us tend to the garden. But when we have to tend to the garden, there's a lot of things we have to do. We have to pick weeds, we have to maintain, the watering system, make sure that it's getting watered. But one of the big things that we have to do, especially with the tomatoes, which is a vine-based plant, okay, is we have to deal with the certain types of things that get in the way. And one of those things are the bad branches. And so they're actually branches that get diseased or hurt for some reason. And then also there's old branches. So as a tomato plant grows upward, the bottom old branches, they actually begin to wither. And so you have to deal with those. Another thing is, like, for instance, with tomatoes, is as these branches grow out from the vine, in between the vine and the branch are these things that, at least people down here in the South, we call them suckers. And the reason they call them suckers is because they are little offshoots that grow in between the vine and the branch, and actually will suck the life out of the branch so that the branch cannot bear as much fruit. And so you have to go in and pull those suckers out. And then another thing that happens a lot of times is branches will actually grow in the wrong direction. So you have to deal with those, either try to move them, or if they won't move, you cut them. And so they don't go where they're not supposed to go. So I want to just have you guys look at these. And I believe that this session is just a time for you to use this session as a mirror for yourself, but also a window into your church. And so, like this slide right here, I can send it to you guys at a later point. But I believe this is a mirror so that you can look at your personal life and say, okay, are there bad branches? Are there old branches? Are there suckers? Are there wrong direction branches in my life that need to be dealt with? And then also for your church culture. And when you look to the left side, you see bad branches. These are things that actually are hurting your church. These could be sinful patterns. These could be just, things that are causing issues in the church. It could be a program, a structure, a leader, or a key person, or a disposition or part of the culture that just honestly is bad and it's toxic, and those things need to be pruned. Another thing is old branches, and they could be defined as what we've always done. And those could represent things that are now irrelevant or unfruitful that once, if you're honest, were actually very, very fruitful. They're not fruitful anymore, but they were. And those could represent maybe events, programs, or systems that you have going in your church that may need to be pruned or let go of. And then the suckers, or those items in your personal life or in your church culture that are causing a drain on you. These are the kind of like the good things that aren't the best things that are actually keeping you from engaging your city and your church from engaging your city. And those could represent, again, programs, leaders, events, things that you have going on that are good, but they're just not great. And then ultimately, there's also another thing with wrong direction branches. Assess yourself in your own church culture. Okay, are there things that are just honestly pointing us the opposite way of engaging our city? In my own life, and then also with the church, are there things that are doing that? So I wanted to pose these 4 things to you, and I want to ask you 4 questions. So the first question is, in spite of COVID and everything that's been going on, what are things in your personal life that still need to be pruned? So just think about that for a minute. If you want to take some notes, personal life. Me and my family had to deal with a lot of things, a lot of commitments that we had to change. And we're still changing even right now. What are some personal things? Are there some bad branches in your personal life? Are there some old branches, things you've always done, but hey, maybe that God's calling you into a new season of the way the rhythms in your life? Are there things that are just sucking the life out of you that you need to figure out how you can remove that from your own life? And then are there things in your life that you're doing, but it's just not taking you in the right direction? So the second question I want to ask, based on the first, what are you going to do now to take action? What are the steps you're going to take to prune and simplify? You could write that down. You could take notes yourself of specific things in your own personal life that you're gonna begin to do. Maybe it's setting up a meeting with your spouse and meeting with them and saying, hey, what are the things we need to reassess? So you could make those decisions. The third question, what are things that your church or organization needs to prune or simplify? This is a big question that you are not going to be able to answer in this moment, but I want to challenge you to take this question over the next week or two with your team and begin to assess and ask this. And if you're anything like me, the reality is many times we take this question and we ask, but we're still really unwilling to let go of things maybe the Lord actually wants us to let go of or prune. That's at our church or in our organization. So try to have the willingness as well to obey his leading if he's calling you to let go of some things. And then the fourth question is, what are you going to do right now? What's a next step for you as a leader or a follower of Jesus to continue the process of pruning? Again, this is not a new concept probably for you. I believe in the last year, you've already been going through this process. But if there's been resistance in you, if there's been resistance in your congregation to embrace the change, what are some other action steps that you need to take? So to close out this session, I want to just land the plane with just a little bit of what happened after that video that I showed you at the beginning of the session. So at the beginning of the session, I showed you a video in February of 2020. We found the carrots, and the carrots weren't that big. It showed us that we need to simplify our lives, right? We heard that word from the Lord. And then March of 2020 happens and our whole world shuts down for a number of months. We had just started a business, coffee shop, which is not a very good business to start when people aren't allowed to go anywhere. And anyways, our ministry was operating at its maximum potential that we had ever seen. We were thriving, we were doing all kinds of stuff. I mean, it was just crazy busy, right? And suddenly everything shuts down. And I realized, oh my goodness, like the Lord is actually really giving us a unique opportunity right now to simplify. And so I made a pivot in March of 2020, and I shut everything down, everything that I could. And I got back to just the basics. I said, okay, our whole team, we're going to get together and we're going to fast and pray. And we started to really see a unity come into our team that we had never seen before, because suddenly we were spending all this time growing and connecting and praying together. And what that did is it absolutely shifted the culture of our organization, that we're never going back to the way we did things pre-COVID. And one of the major things that we shifted is the emphasis on our team gathering and praying together, and also our team gathering and studying the Word of God together. And like that, we just decided that's not going to stop just because, restrictions are lifting here in Georgia. We don't care. We're going to continue to do some of these rhythms, because we discovered in the simplification of the shutdown, just these basic things that our culture was missing that we really needed in order for us to really engage our city, I believe, in a fruitful way. And so we went through that process. And then towards the end of this past year, the Lord just started to show us, and there's certain things we were doing pre-COVID that we just started to say, we're not doing this anymore. We're changing this. We're not doing this. We're getting rid of this. And some hard decisions were made. Some people were offended. Some people didn't like decisions that were being made. And we had to go through that process. And I'm sure you can relate to that and have been there where you're the one having to make the shots. And not everyone's going to be happy with those decisions. But I want to encourage you as a leader to follow the leading of the Holy Spirit. If he's calling you to begin to prune and simplify, the path may be hard right now, but on the other side of it being hard, I can assure you there's going to be incredible fruitfulness in this next season for you and for your church. I believe that in the name of Jesus. And the last thing that I want to share, we went through at the very end, the Lord took us through a very serious process of even pruning our staff structure and our team. And we had to just really assess not only our events and our programs, but even our staff, and just begin to understand, okay, are there people on our team that literally are still around, but are called to do something else? And are we just holding them here because it's convenient and easy for our ministry? And do we need to empower them to take that next step? And so we actually just went through the past 3 months, a huge shift to where we just started really commissioning people into launching their own ministries and doing all these different things. And so I believe that's another thing you may need to assess and see. Are there things, people, stuff in my church where we're holding on to things that people actually need to be empowered, and they need to be, maybe even sent off and delegated to do something else, or another church in the region or whatever. So I'm not saying that's exactly what God's going to do with you and through you, but I was just sharing some of my journey, that's what we went through in that. And here's what I believe that we're seeing now. Our processes in our ministry is more simple than ever before. We just do like 2 or 3 things, and we're just so laser focused now. And what I'm already seeing in just a few months of us relaunching these ministries is we are seeing exponential fruitfulness in the 3 things we're doing. Whereas the fruit beforehand in all these ministries, it was minimal, but we had a lot of things going on. So we seemed like, wow, this is good. We're doing a lot. But the reality is that all of those things weren't really bearing a lot of fruit. And now I'm already seeing that with the shift that we made, simplifying, allowing some pruning to happen, that we're seeing exponential fruitfulness in the few things that we have chosen. So with that, I want to throw it back to you, Pastor Michael. I hope that I've set you up, Pastor Michael, for I know what you're about to share. And yeah, I would just, I'm excited for this next session that I'm going to teach after Pastor Michael. It's going to be about how, what we do after the pruning and simplifying. And we're going to continue in the path of engaging our city. But yeah, thank you.